You've stood in a crowded room, surrounded by more people than you could count, and felt completely alone. Not lonely in the sad, wistful sense. Invisible, as if you could disappear entirely and the room would keep moving without a single ripple. That feeling seems backwards. More people should mean more chances to be seen. Instead, the opposite happens, and almost nobody stops to ask why. Start with a strange fact hiding in plain sight. The bigger the crowd around you, the less likely any single person in it is to notice you, help you, or even register that you exist. That isn't a metaphor. It's measurable. In the late 1960s, the psychologists Bibb Latané and John Darley set out to understand why, and their research became one of the most cited findings in social psychology. They staged emergencies, sometimes real, sometimes simulated, and measured how quickly people responded. When a person was alone and witnessed someone in distress, they helped almost every time, and fast. But add more witnesses to the same scene, and something strange happened. The odds that any individual would step in actually dropped. Not because people in groups are colder, because responsibility, once it's shared among many, starts to feel like it belongs to no one in particular. Latani and Darley called this diffusion of responsibility, and it explains something deeper than emergencies. It explains ordinary rooms. Think about the last party you walked into where you didn't know many people. You weren't in danger. Nobody needed to rescue you. But the same underlying math was quietly working against you. In a room of 5 people, someone notices when you arrive. Someone tracks when you go quiet. In a room of 200 people, that responsibility to notice you gets divided so many times that your individual presence rounds down to almost nothing. Nobody decided to ignore you. The math of the crowd did it for them. So why does this feel so personal when it's actually just arithmetic? Because your brain isn't built to process 200 individual relationships at once. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent years studying the size of primate social groups relative to brain size, and his research produced a now famous estimate. Human beings can realistically maintain around 150 stable social relationships at a time, a number that later became known as Dunbar's number. Past that threshold, your brain doesn't expand its social bandwidth. It compresses. Strangers stop registering as individuals and start registering as scenery, background, texture in a room, rather than people with names and stories. Here's the uncomfortable part. That compression happens both ways. Just as you struggle to individually register 200 strangers, 200 strangers struggle to individually register you. You're not being singled out for exclusion. You've simply crossed into a head count. Your ancestors' brains were never built to track as individuals. For most of human history, the total number of people you'd ever meet across an entire lifetime might not have exceeded a few hundred. A crowded room today can contain more strangers than your ancestors encountered in years. This is where the sociologist Georg Simmel's early observations about city life become strikingly relevant, decades before modern neuroscience caught up to explain the mechanism. Simmel noticed that people living in dense urban environments developed something he called a blasé attitude, a kind of emotional numbness toward the constant stream of strangers around them. He argued it wasn't coldness, it was self-protection. If your nervous system tried to fully register every single face in a crowded street the way it would register a close friend's face, it would overload almost instantly. So the mind does something adaptive. It filters. It flattens most faces into background noise, reserving its full attention for the small circle of people who actually matter to your daily survival and connection. You are, in other words, running an ancient filtering system built for tribes of dozens, dropped into rooms, trains, and cities built for thousands. That filter isn't malfunctioning when you feel invisible in a crowd. It's working exactly as designed. The tragedy is that the design never anticipated stadiums, subway platforms, or open-plan offices with 200 desks. So, what do you actually do with a nervous system like that? The research here points somewhere surprisingly specific. If crowds dilute your visibility because attention gets divided across too many people, then the fix isn't a bigger room or a louder presence, it's a smaller number. Psychologists who study belonging consistently find that feeling truly seen doesn't require being noticed by everyone in a space. It requires being fully registered by just one or two people inside it. One steady conversation partner in a loud room can override the anonymity of 200 strangers around you because your nervous system was never asking to be seen by the crowd. It was asking to be seen by someone. That reframes the entire ache of standing unnoticed in a packed room. You are not failing to be interesting enough, charming enough, or loud enough to cut through 200 competing conversations. You are running headfirst into a numerical ceiling your brain has carried since long before crowds this large existed at all. The room isn't rejecting you. The room is simply too large for the ancient tool you're using to be seen inside it. Next time you feel that particular flavor of loneliness, surrounded on every side and somehow unseen, try naming what's actually happening. Not, nobody here cares about me, but this room has exceeded the number of people my nervous system can register, and that number is exceeding theirs too, in both directions. Then look for the smaller room inside the larger one. One conversation, one person willing to actually track whether you stayed or left. That is the scale your brain was built to be witnessed at, and it's the only scale that was ever going to work. You've stood in a crowded room, surrounded by more people than you could count, and felt completely alone. But that feeling was never proof that you don't belong. It was your ancient tribal nervous system quietly telling you the truth. It was built to be known by dozens, not sensed by hundreds, and it was simply waiting for you to find the smaller circle where it could finally do its job.